It was May 2026. The setting was the Althorpe Literary Festival. The Spencer family estate. The same estate where Diana is buried. And Charles Spencer, the 9th Earl Spencer, stood up and decided he was done being quiet. He looked at the crowd and issued an ultimatum. To the BBC. To the incoming chairman, Matt Brittin. He told them to lance the boil once and for all. To finally end the conspiracy of silence that has been festering for almost 30 years. What did he want? He wants the BBC to appoint an official historian. He wants them to dig through every remaining document. The ones tied to disgraced journalist Martin Bashir. He wants the truth brushed out once and for all. But here is the part that should send chills down your spine. Charles Spencer isn't just talking about journalism standards. He isn't just talking about professional ethics or institutional accountability. He is making a direct, devastating link between the BBC's deception and his sister's death. In a 2025 interview, he said, "There are high-ranking people in the BBC who participated in securing this interview through appalling deception." Then came the bombshell. "I am sure that this led directly to Diana being left vulnerable in Paris on the night she died." Let that sink in. He is not saying the BBC made a mistake. He is not saying they were careless. He is saying they played a role in what happened on that night in the Pont de El Alma tunnel. That their lies, their cover-ups, their institutional silence, all of it created a chain of events that ended with his sister dying in a Paris car crash at the age of 36. He is pointing fingers at 5 suspects in the BBC's senior ranks. People he believes took part in the cover-up after the interview aired. This is not just a memory for him. This is an active investigation. He is demanding accountability. He is demanding they name names. He is demanding the BBC stop hiding behind corporate language and face what they did. But why is he so angry now, nearly 30 years later? Because the official Dyson report in 2021 found the BBC's internal investigation woeful and ineffective. It found that executives cleared Bashir when they should have asked tough questions. It found that the very people who should have been protecting the public were protecting themselves instead. Now, Charles Spencer is saying enough is enough. He is giving the BBC a choice: come clean or be exposed. He wants to lance the boil so the truth can finally come out. And if the BBC won't do it voluntarily, he will keep applying pressure until they have no other option. But this is only the beginning. Because to understand why Charles Spencer is so relentless, so unyielding, so absolutely ferocious in his pursuit of the truth, we have to go back to the beginning. To the man at the center of the storm. The man he calls a compulsive liar. Martin Bashir. Martin Bashir. The name alone makes Charles Spencer's blood boil. And in his explosive revelations, the Earl didn't hold back. He called Bashir a compulsive liar. He said the interview he conducted with Diana is the worst piece of journalism I've seen. Not just bad journalism. Not just irresponsible journalism. The worst. In his entire life. But who is this man? And what exactly did he do? Let's rewind to 1995. Diana was at her most vulnerable. Her marriage to Prince Charles was crumbling. The palace was closing in around her. She was lonely. She was paranoid. She was desperate for someone she could trust. And Martin Bashir knew exactly how to exploit that desperation. Here is the jaw-dropping part. Bashir didn't just ask questions. He manipulated. He lied. He cheated. He showed Diana forged bank statements. These fake documents made it look like her closest aides were being paid to spy on her. He told her that her own bodyguard was leaking information to the tabloids. Even worse. Bashir told Diana that her brother, Charles Spencer, was working with the press against her. That her personal secretary, Patrick Jeffson, was taking bribes from newspapers. He convinced Diana that her phones were being tapped by intelligence services. He even told her that the Prince of Wales's office had bugged Prince William's watch. The watch on her own son's wrist. Can you imagine the terror? Diana was already isolated. Already surrounded by people she wasn't sure she could trust. Now, thanks to Bashir, she felt completely surrounded by enemies. She believed that everyone was against her. Her family. Her staff. Her own children. Bashir had built a fortress of lies around her, and she was trapped inside, alone, afraid, and utterly convinced that no one in her life was safe. Charles Spencer only found out the full truth years later. In 2020, when he finally saw the forged bank statements for the first time, the penny dropped. He realized that Bashir's lies didn't stop when the cameras stopped rolling. They kept living inside Diana's head. They made her feel unsafe in her own life. They pushed her further and further away from the people who actually cared about her, the people who, if she had trusted them, might have been able to protect her. In his own words, Spencer said Bashir defrauded and induced his sister into granting the interview. He called the methods utterly reprehensible. He believes the deception continued to haunt Diana in the months and years that followed. It increased her paranoia. It made her trust no one. It severed the relationships that could have anchored her. And that, he firmly believes, made her vulnerable on the night she died in Paris. But here is the question that still haunts the BBC, and should haunt all of us. Why didn't they stop him? Why, when the truth about Bashir's methods began to surface, did they circle the wagons? Why did they protect him for so many years, allowing the story to be buried while the Spencer family lived with unanswered questions? Charles Spencer says the BBC has a conspiracy of silence. He is demanding answers. And he is not going to stop until he gets them. Now, let's step away from the conspiracy for a moment. Let's talk about something much more personal. Much more painful. Because behind all the lawsuits and the BBC investigations and the public statements, there is a brother who lost his sister. And nearly 30 years later, he is still broken by it. Charles Spencer sat down on ITV's Loose Men, a show about men's mental health, and he opened up in a way we have never seen from him before. He compared losing Diana to an amputation. Think about that word. Not a loss. Not a tragedy. An amputation. It's deliberate. It's specific. It means something was cut away from your body. A part of you that you needed to function. And no matter how much time passes, no matter how much you heal, you will feel the ghost of it for the rest of your life. He explained it like this. You expect to lose your grandparents. You expect, eventually, to lose your parents. That is the natural order of things. It hurts, but it is something the human mind has built a template for. But losing a sibling? That is something different entirely. It breaks you in a way you never see coming. Because siblings aren't supposed to go first. They are supposed to be there at the end of the story, the ones who remember where you started. Diana was only 2 years younger than Charles. They grew up together. They shared the same childhood home. The same holidays. The same inside jokes. The same devastating front row seats to their parents' bitter and public divorce. They were not just brother and sister. They were partners in survival. And now, he has no one left to share his childhood with. His older sisters are significantly older than him and Diana. They had already left home by the time Charles and Diana were forming their earliest memories. So when Diana died, Charles didn't just lose a sibling, he lost the only other witness to his childhood. The only person on earth who remembered things the way he remembered them. Here is the part that breaks your heart. Charles admitted that for years after Diana's death, he would still reach for the phone. He would see something funny. He would hear a piece of gossip. He would want to call her and share it, the way siblings do. And then reality would hit. She wasn't there. She would never pick up again. The number was dead. The voice was gone. And that moment of forgetting, followed by the crash of remembering, is something grief counselors call phantom grief. It doesn't stop. It just comes less often. But it never fully goes away. He hasn't let go of her. He visits her grave almost every single day. And where is her grave? On an island in the middle of a lake at Althorpe. The Spencer family estate. The place where the literary festival is held. The place where he gave his famous eulogy. You can only reach the grave by rowboat. It is peaceful. It is private. It is his. He told the audience that he wants her resting place to be dignified. He doesn't want it to become a circus, a tourist attraction, or a media spectacle. So he keeps it quiet. He rows out there alone. He sits with her. He talks to her. He tells her about his day. And then he rows back, carrying everything that was never said, everything that will never be resolved. But here is the crucial thing to understand. This grief is not passive. It is not quiet. It is not the kind of sadness that makes you retreat. For Charles Spencer, Grief is fuel. It is the fire that drives him to fight the BBC, to expose the lies, to make sure that the people who hurt his sister are held accountable. Because he can't bring her back. But he can make sure her story is told truthfully, and that no one, no institution, no executive, no compulsive liar, ever gets away with what they did to her. Just when you think Charles Spencer has enough on his plate, his personal life explodes in a very different direction. And trust me, it is just as dramatic as the BBC scandal. Maybe even more. Let's start with the wedding. In March 2026, the Earl shocked everyone by quietly marrying his fourth wife, Cat Jarman. And it wasn't a grand aristocratic affair. It was a secret ceremony. In Arizona. In the middle of the desert. No press. No fanfare. No headlines until after it was already done. The bride is Cat Jarman. She is 18 years younger than him. A Norwegian archaeologist who wears combat trousers, digs up Viking remains, and has built a reputation as one of the most respected researchers in her field. She is about as far from the aristocratic socialites Charles usually dates as you can possibly get. For a man who grew up in a castle, who inherited an earldom, who has spent his life steeped in English history and tradition, she is a total departure. She doesn't care about titles. She doesn't care about the Spencer legacy or what the tabloids think. She cares about history, about artifacts, about the truth buried in the ground, waiting to be uncovered. Sound familiar? Charles is obsessed with truth too, with uncovering what has been deliberately hidden. Maybe that is why they clicked. Maybe he recognized something in her, the same refusal to accept convenient narratives, the same drive to dig deeper. But here is the messy part. The lead up to this wedding was anything but romantic. It was a legal nightmare. A bitter, ugly legal battle between Cat and Charles' ex-wife, Karen Spencer, the mother of his two youngest children, the woman who was once the Countess of Spencer. Karen didn't go quietly. Cat sued her, and the allegations are genuinely shocking. Cat claimed that Karen had disclosed her private medical information without consent. Specifically, that Cat has multiple sclerosis. Multiple sclerosis is a serious, lifelong disease. It affects the brain and spinal cord. It can cause debilitating fatigue, vision problems, coordination difficulties, and cognitive changes. It is deeply personal. It is the kind of information that a person has the absolute right to share on her own terms, in her own time. Cat alleged that Karen told Althorpe staff about the diagnosis. Even worse, she claimed Karen told her daughter's school about it. A child's school. Imagine that. Your child's teachers knowing your private medical battles because of your partner's ex-wife. The intrusion. The humiliation. The sense of violation. Cat said this caused her significant distress and embarrassment. She said it violated her privacy in the most fundamental way. And she took Karen to court to stop it from happening again. Charles was caught in the middle, his ex-wife, his new wife, a lawsuit playing out in the press, and the entire country watching. It painted a picture of a man whose life was a full-scale soap opera. A man juggling grief and justice and family drama and 4 marriages. A man who, despite everything, kept showing up. Kept fighting. Never stopped. Through all of this chaos, he never stopped pushing the BBC. He never stopped visiting Diana's grave. The drama in his personal life didn't slow him down. If anything, it added another layer of battle-hardened determination. He was already wounded. Already running on grief and purpose. Now he had more fires burning. And he walked toward every single one of them. But why is Charles so relentless? Why does he keep digging into the past when most people would have moved on? Why does he fight like a man with nothing left to lose? The answer lies in his own childhood. In a darkness he kept hidden for decades. And it is about to get even more shocking. To understand Charles Spencer's anger, his refusal to be silenced, his instinct to name names and demand accountability, you have to look at where it comes from. At the wounds that were inflicted on him before he was even old enough to understand what was happening. In 2024, Charles released his memoir. He called it a very private school. And what he revealed inside sent shockwaves through Britain. He detailed the horrific physical and sexual abuse he suffered at Maidwell Hall boarding school. This was in the 1970s. He was just 8 years old when it started. 8 years old. A little boy. Away from home for the first time. Away from his family, his sisters, the familiar rooms of Althorpe. Surrounded by adults who were supposed to be in loco parentis, in the place of parents. Responsible for his safety. Responsible for his well-being. Instead, they hurt him. Repeatedly. In the most violating ways imaginable. Charles didn't hint at it. He didn't speak in vague, careful language. He named names. He called out the teachers who abused him. He called out the headmaster who knew, or should have known, and looked the other way. He described the abuse as relentless and brutal. And he made clear that it left marks on him that no amount of time or privilege or therapy has fully erased. Here is the part that shows you just how deep the trauma goes. Charles admitted that while writing the book, while forcing himself to revisit those memories, to put them into words, to make them real on the page, he suffered a breakdown. He had endless nightmares. He couldn't sleep. He couldn't function. He had to check into a residential treatment center, a place where he could finally, safely, begin to process the trauma that had been buried inside him for 50 years. 50 years. He carried that weight for half a century. While he gave speeches. While he sat with kings and politicians. While he stood in Westminster Abbey and delivered one of the most devastating eulogies ever spoken, with 1 billion people watching. All of that time, he was carrying something most people never knew about. In interviews, he spoke about how the abuse shaped his adult life. He said it left him with no understanding of intimacy. He couldn't connect with people in the ways that healthy relationships require. He couldn't fully trust. He couldn't be fully present. He believes this directly contributed to what he honestly called the wreckage of his previous marriages. 3 failed marriages. A trail of people hurt on both sides. All of it, he says, traced back to what happened to a little boy at a school that was supposed to keep him safe. But here is where it gets powerful. Charles Spencer refused to stay silent. He wrote the book anyway. He named the school anyway. He confronted the system that failed him, the culture of silence that protected abusers in elite institutions for generations. And in doing so, he made it possible for other survivors from that school to come forward. His courage opened a door that had been locked for decades. And he is applying that exact same relentless pursuit of truth to the people who wronged his sister. He knows, deeply, personally, in his bones, what it feels like to be silenced. To be powerless against people with authority. To carry a secret that should never have been yours to carry. He survived it once. He refused to be silenced then. And he refuses now. So when Charles Spencer stands up at the Althorpe Literary Festival and demands answers from the BBC, when he issues ultimatums to chairmen and calls out unnamed executives and refuses to let a 30-year-old story die, he isn't just fighting for Diana. He is fighting for every person who was ever told to keep quiet. He is fighting for the little boy who was abused and ignored and sent back to class the next morning. He is fighting because he knows what happens when powerful institutions protect their own. He knows the cost. He paid it himself. Diana couldn't fight back anymore. But he can. He will. And he is nowhere near done.